The numbers continue to rise month after month, as you know, and we're up, depending on categories, we're up 20 to 40% year on date. Sometimes that can be lost when we're just looking at month after month. But in Clare in particular, as you say, it has now become kind of an embedded number that's just what's there every month. And I suppose when I looked at the figures, a few things occurred to me, and one of them was that number is the number of people in emergency accommodation. Of course, it doesn't include all those other people who are not accessing
The
the
hidden
accommodation.
homeless.
The hidden homeless. On Saturday morning, coincidentally, I was in a rural village in Clare, and I met a man who had been rough sleeping the night before, and I would say for many many nights before that. So he's not included in those figures. He's not counted, and I'm aware of other people like that around Clare. So it's not just an urban problem. Obviously, the numbers are bigger in the urban areas as the population is bigger, but it is embedded in Clare now that people are homeless, and many of them are not even accessing the emergency services. Never mind getting in there and not having anywhere to move out to, which is another concern. A pathway. Emergency is supposed to be a transitional arrangement when somebody needs it for an emergency. The clue is in the name. But there are people who are now spending long, long periods of time in emergency accommodation who really should be accommodated elsewhere.
And is that the norm, Neil? How long would the average person stay with Midwest Simon?
There's no average on it. It varies hugely, but I suppose we see two types of issues that have come up with us in the last few weeks. We have, for example, one family in one of our services who has been in that service for 3 years. So that's a family where the kids have spent Christmas for 3 years in one room. And indeed, one of the children was born in the service and is now a toddler in the same room. I mean, that's not right. That's a
Mm.
family who would be ready to move into their own accommodation if we could find the accommodation
Mm.
for them. We can't. So that's one type of person. Then there are others, and we have plenty of them in our emergency services where they have other issues, health issues in general. It could be substance abuse, it could be mental health, physical health. It can be many things. Some of those people would not be able to live completely independently at the moment, but they would be able to live with some supports if we could find again some place to get for them.
Mm.
So there are people who are ready to move out of emergency. Now we do have people who move out. Don't get me wrong. There is a small in and outflow, but the output could be a lot larger, and that would then make it what it's supposed to be: emergency for when
Mm.
people need it.
And we've spoken about this before, but growing up in emergency accommodation, that has to be devastating for a child's development.
Oh, I think we will be reading about this in the newspapers in decades to come. You know, we've had our scandals in the history of the state, and we look back at them, and we're talking about restitution and how could that have happened. I think this will be one of them. It does have an effect. I speak to families, and they tell me about it, and you can only imagine the challenges of trying to live as a family of maybe five people in one room. There is no space. You can't go anywhere. If somebody has a row, they can't step out for a minute to cool down. It's terrible. And kids can't have sleepovers. They can't invite their friends over to visit them. They're all trying to do their homework on top of each other. It might be all right for a week or two while you're waiting for somewhere else, but it's not somewhere to be for 3+ years.
Neil, I'm curious about one matter because we've heard from charities for years about how their accommodation is at capacity, how there is literally no more space for people to come in. All the while, the numbers are rising. Indeed, in County Clare, we're seeing over 100, as we say, compared to a couple of what feels like just a couple of short months ago when it was maybe closer to 70 or 80. So, do charities like Midwest Simon have to enhance their capacity? Do they have to expand their facilities? Are makeshift measures being considered because of the level of demand?
All of the above, Sean. We are constantly looking for new properties and developing new services. We have a large one underway now in Limerick at the moment, for example. And we are always trying to squeeze more people in, and that's a terrible way of putting it, but that's what we have to do, particularly in the winter months where we try to make sure that nobody is out in the streets if they don't need to be. But that leads to overcrowded accommodation, which leads to further problems like we were just talking about. So it's not where we want to be. We do keep expanding our services, but we can't keep up with the increase in the numbers. And I suppose the other thing, what maybe the numbers hide a little bit, is the change in demographics that we're seeing. which will have further implications. So we talk about the increase in children every month, and that's a very real problem. But something we don't talk about is the increase in older people entering into homelessness. And that in the Midwest actually is the highest percentage increase in the last year. It it is what is it, 47% increase in a year. So the numbers are still relatively small, but they're increasing hugely. And there are no services for people over 65 to move on to. So we need to be planning ahead. We're not great at doing that, but if we don't, it's going to we're going to be talking about it, as I say, for decades to come. And I suppose the other thing that these figures hide to a certain extent, and it's about capacity, is we foresee a huge increase in the coming months because of the changes to the private rental rules in March and the tightening of landlords being able to issue notices to quit. So we anecdotally hear that there have been a huge number of notices to quit issued in February. We know they were up the end of last year in anticipation. They were up 41% in the last quarter of last year compared to the year before, and we think it'll be worse. So the figures we have today are only up to the end of February. We haven't seen this yet, but I think in the next month or two, we're going to see a huge increase.
And you mentioned the new legislation there, the renters legislation, which has been hugely controversial. I don't want to oversimplify the problem, Neil, but if the government was to implement a measure in the coming months, or immediately for that matter, what would that measure be that would alleviate the problem in the Midwest to some degree?
I suppose there are two aspects to it, Seán. The big picture is we need more homes, we need more houses, more buildings, and we all know that that's a larger crisis, and that has to be expedited to solve this problem eventually. But in the short term, what everybody is fighting for the same accommodation. That's not the way it should be. But if somebody enters homelessness, it is very difficult to get them out of it, particularly after a long period of time. So we have got to prevent people who are in accommodation now becoming homeless. We deal with the waiting list of people trying to get in then after that. So something that would help that, I suppose, would be a complete no-fault eviction ban, that somebody can't be evicted from their home if they behave themselves and carry out, deal with their responsibilities, and at least try and reduce the number of new homeless over the coming year or two while we're building these new houses.